Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtuprayeshu Avatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5, Lord Rishabhadev's teachings to his sons. Text number 15 onwards. Putrascha Shishyanscha Nirpo Gururavam Aloka Kama Mad Anugrihartha Ittam Vimanya Uru Nu Shishya Tadgyana Na Yojit Karmasu Karma Mudan Kam Yojyan Manujo Artham Labheta Nipatayan Nashtu Drisham Higarte. If one is serious about going back to Godhead, he must consider the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the summum bonum and the chief aim of life. So summum bonum means a topmost thing. If he is a father instructing his sons, a spiritual master instructing his disciples, or a king instructing his citizens, he must instruct them as I have advised. Without being angry, he should continue giving instructions, even if his disciple, son, or citizen is sometimes unable to follow his order. Ignorant people who engage in pious and impious activities should be engaged in devotional service by all means. They should always avoid fruitive activity. If one puts into bondage of karmic activity his disciple, son, or citizen who is bereft of transcendental vision, how will one profit? It is like leading a blind man to a dark well and causing him to fall in. So for anybody and everybody, the summum bonum, the topmost aim of life is to go back to Godhead. So one should avoid fruitive activities altogether. And this is where Rishabhdev Maharaj is saying, if one puts into bondage of karmic activity his disciple, son, or citizen, who is bereft of transcendental vision, how will one profit? Means if one is a father, mother, spiritual master, or a king, they should all be concerned about the spiritual advancement of their followers. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita, let not the wise disrupt the minds of ignorant who are attached to fruitive action. They should be encouraged not to refrain from work, but to work in the spirit of devotion. So it's so important. Loka swayam shreyasi nashtadrisher yorthan samihet nikam kamaha anyo vera sukhalesha hetur ananta dukkham chanaved mudha. Due to ignorance, the materialistic person does not know anything about his real self-interest, the auspicious path in life. He is simply bound to material enjoyment by lusty desires, and all his plans are made for this purpose. For temporary sense gratification, such a person creates a society of envy, and due to this mentality, he plunges into the ocean of suffering. Such a foolish person does not even know about this. So due to envy, he plunges into the ocean of suffering, and due to the mentality of sense gratification. It is so hard to see, but this is what we all are getting into. Whether materialists, basically everybody is envious of everybody else. That's for sure. But even though we try to take up devotion service, the spiritual path, still we are envious of each other. And what happens? It plunges into the ocean of suffering. The word nashta drishti, meaning one who has no eyes to see the future, is very significant in this verse. Life goes on from one body to another, and the activities performed in this life are enjoyed or suffered in the next life, if not later in this life. One who is unintelligent, who has no eyes to see the future, simply creates enmity and fights with others for sense gratification. As a result, one suffers in the next life, but due to being like a blind man, he continues to act in such a way that he suffers unlimitedly. Such a person is a Muda, one who simply wastes his time and does not understand the Lord's devotional service. And this is what 99.9% of people are doing. They just don't care. And this is Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my eternal creative potency, Yoga Maya. And so the deluded world knows me not, who am unborn and infallible. In the Katha Upanishad, it is also said, Avidyaya mantre vartamana swayam dhira pandita manyamana. Although ignorant, people still go to the other blind men for leadership. As a result, both are subjected to miserable conditions. The blind lead the blind into the ditch. So blind means one who is blind for the spiritual progress, for his own identification, understanding who am I, who is God. So these kind of people, and most of the so-called leaders are like this only. They themselves don't know where they're going and forget about leading their disciples or followers on the right path. All they want is money from their followers. Kastam swam tadabhigyo vipaschit avidyaya mantare vartamana drishtva panastam sagrina kubuddhim parayo jayed utpatgam yathandam. If someone is ignorant and addicted to the path of samsara, how can one who is actually learned, merciful, and advanced in spiritual knowledge engage him in fruitive activity and thus further entangle him in material existence? If a blind man is walking down the wrong path, how can a gentleman allow him to continue on his way to danger? How can he approve this method? No wise or kind man can allow this. And this is what every preacher, every devotee who comes and who preaches, this is what he cannot see, a blind man walking down the wrong path. One who is blind to Krishna consciousness, definitely he is walking, not just walking, he is running. Just imagine if a blind man is running on the wrong path and he's going to fall into the ditch. Wouldn't or shouldn't a gentleman means a devotee, shouldn't he help him? Shouldn't he rescue him? Should he save him? That is compassion. So the saving should also be in the mode of compassion, not in a proudful mood that we try to help somebody. That, oh, I'm so better than you are. You are a blind man and I'm saving you. I'm your savior. We never see such kind of attitude, even in life of like Jesus Christ. He gave up his life. He gave his life to save people. And so many preachers. In fact, there's one place I was reading, it was said, a Vaishnav has nothing to do in this material world. Nothing. He doesn't need to live here. Only purpose he stays here is to preach. That's the only purpose. Otherwise, there's nothing in the material world for him. And the preaching is so important, so important. Even Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one who gives this message of mine to others is very most dear to me. There is no one more dear than him. And next verse is text 18 is very, very important, especially for all the grihasthas. Guru na sasyat, svajano na sasyat, pita na sasyat, janani na sasyat, devam na tatsyam, na patishasyam, na mocheda samapeta mrityum. One who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never, na sasyat, so many times, na, should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. One who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. There are many spiritual masters, but Rishabdev advises that one should not become a spiritual master if he is unable to save his disciple from the path of birth and death. Means until he himself is a pure devotee and he makes his dependents devotees. Unless one is a pure devotee of Krishna, he cannot save himself from the path of repeated birth and death. One can stop birth and death only by returning home back to Godhead. However, who can go back to Godhead unless he understands the Supreme Lord in truth? Janma karma cha me div. We have many instances in history illustrating Rishabdev's instructions. Shukracharya was rejected by Bali Maharaj due to his inability to save Bali Maharaj from the path of repeated birth and death. Shukracharya was not a pure devotee. He was more or less inclined to fruitive activity, and he objected when Bali Maharaj promised to give everything to Lord Vishnu. Actually, one is supposed to give everything to the Lord because everything belongs to the Lord. Consequently, the Supreme Lord advises in Bhagavad Gita, Yadat karoshi yadashnashi. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as an offering unto me. This is bhakti. Unless one is devoted, he cannot give everything to the Supreme Lord. Unless one can do so, he cannot become a spiritual master, husband, father, or mother. Similarly, the wives of the Brahmins who were performing sacrifices gave up their relatives just to satisfy Krishna. This is an example of a wife rejecting a husband who cannot deliver her from the impending dangers of birth and death. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj rejected his father and Bharat Maharaj rejected his mother. Janani nasa syat. The word Daivam indicates a demigod or one who accepts worship from a dependent. Ordinarily, the spiritual master, husband, father, mother, or superior relative accepts worship from an inferior relative. But here Rishabdev forbids this. First, the father, spiritual master, or husband must be able to release the dependent from repeated birth and death. If he cannot do this, he plunges himself into the ocean of reproachment for his unlawful activities. Everyone should be very responsible and take charge of his dependents, just as a spiritual master takes charge of his disciple or a father takes charge of his son. All these responsibilities cannot be discharged honestly unless one can save the dependent from repeated birth and death. So important this responsibility. Of course, Prabhupada didn't say it here, but some other place I read or heard that he said for husband and for mother and father especially, that you produce children and don't take them on the path of devotion, on the path of to take them away from the path of repeated birth and death. Then what's the difference between you and animals? Animals also having children, you also having children, just to enjoy sex life. Very, very heavy statement. So for that, I know everybody gets worried about after reading this. Um, of course, we cannot make sure that our dependents are going to get liberated because we ourselves are not sure of our position. But at least we can do is we should try. Results are in Krishna's hands, but we should try our best, at least for our family members. So here it is said one should not become a spiritual master, a father, a husband. It doesn't say a wife. It says a mother, but it doesn't say wife because wife is dependent upon the husband. Husband is considered a guru of the wife. And father, mother are considered guru of their children. And a worshipable demigod, of course, it is clarified in the purport that anyway, if we have some inferiors who look upon us, who look up to us, then we should be able to help them to get on the path of bhakti. Whether it is at work, whether it is in our relationships, whether it is in our society where we live. So the point is either we go into the cave and have nothing to do with anybody else and do our bhajan, but that's not what Krishna wants. So wherever we live, we have to try to preach to others. At least give them a chance to get out of this cycle of birth and death. Otherwise, it's not a very responsible living. Idam shariram mam durvibhavyam sattvam hi me hridayam yatra dharma prishte krito me yadharma aradha ato hi mam rishbham prahuraryaha. My transcendental body, Satchidananda Vigraha, looks exactly like a human form, but it's not a material human body. It's inconceivable. I'm not forced by nature to accept a particular type of body. I take on a body by my own sweet will. My heart is also spiritual, and I always think of the welfare of my devotees. Therefore, within my heart can be found the process of devotion service, which is meant for the devotees. Far from my heart have I abandoned irreligion, adharma, and non-devotional activities. They do not appeal to me. Due to all these transcendental qualities, people generally pray to me as Rishabdev, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the best of all living entities. So he is disclosing here that his form is not material, just like our forms are. He is completely spiritual. In this verse, the words idam shariram mam durvibhavyam are very significant. Generally, we experience two energies, material and spiritual. We have some experience of the material energy, earth, water, air, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. Because in the material world, everyone's body is composed of these elements. Within the material body is a spirit soul, but we cannot see it with our material eyes. When we see a body full of spiritual energy, it is very difficult for us to understand how the spiritual energy can have a body. It is said that Lord Rishabdev's body is completely spiritual. Therefore, for a materialistic person, it is very difficult to understand. For a materialistic person, the completely spiritual body is inconceivable. We have to accept the words version of the Vedas when our Experimental perception cannot understand a subject. The Supreme Lord has a body with form, but that body is not composed of material elements. It is made of spiritual bliss, eternity, and living force, means Sat, Chit, and Ananda. So, how do we understand? Because we only have experience of a body made of earth, water, fire, air, ether. Even forget about mind, intelligence, also. Just these five elements, which we see, which we touch, which we can relate to. There's a like body we have. But how can the Supreme Lord, when he says, I have a body, but it is made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda? How can we have a body made of Ananda? Ananda is a feeling. Chit is knowledge. Sat is eternality. We cannot conceive of all this. And that is why most of the people say, he is Nirakar. He has no form. As soon as we say he, means he is the person. A person means one who has personality, one who has form. But that's where they get confused. But here, Prabhupada clearly explains, and it is mentioned in other Vedic literature, that his body is made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Just because we cannot understand doesn't mean he doesn't have a form. This is our limitation. Just like I believe in 2019 only, not too long ago, Prime Minister Modi, he utilized that hologram technology by being present at one place, and they projected his hologram image at so many different places, and he gave a speech during election. So one speech given at one place, but with the help of hologram image, it could be heard at so many different places because of technology. Now, what is that hologram image made of? It's just some pixels, some energy, that's all. But it looked exactly like Prime Minister Modi. So if scientists can figure out how to make an image and looks exactly like him, a 3D walking, talking image made of only energy, why can't Krishna do that? And with the more and more this technology getting better and better, these hologram images are going to become better and better. More and more technology is coming, nanotechnology, or this technology, that technology. So these images, maybe one day they'll replace the human beings at work or wherever, and the original person might be just sitting at home. So if scientists can figure all this, of course, they cannot make a spiritual body, but why can't Krishna make a spiritual body made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda? The Mayavadi philosophers are completely unable to conceive of a spiritual body. They say that the spirit is always impersonal. And whenever they see something personal, they take it for granted that it is material. And that's why Krishna says, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. So that is position of Krishna. Unintelligent people think that the Supreme Lord accepts a body composed of the material energy. We can easily understand the material body, but we cannot understand the spiritual body. Therefore, Rishabdev says, Idam Shariram Mam Durvibhave. In the spiritual world, everyone has a spiritual body. There is no conception of material existence there. In the spiritual world, there is only service and the receiving of service. There is only Sevya, Seva, and Sevak. The person served, the process of service, and the servant. So Bhakta, Bhakti, and Bhagwan. That's the only thing there in the spiritual world. These three items are completely spiritual, and therefore the spiritual world is called absolute. There is no relativity there, it's all absolute. There is no tinge of material contamination there. Being completely transcendental to the material conception, Lord Rishabdev states that his heart is composed of dharma. Dharma is explained in Bhagavad Gita 1866. Sarva dharman parityajya. In the spiritual world, every living entity is surrendered to the Supreme Lord and is completely on the spiritual platform. Although there are servitors, the served, and the service, all are spiritual and variegated. At the present moment, due to our material conception, everything is durvibhavya, inconceivable. Being the Supreme, the Lord is called Rishabh, the best. In terms of the Vedic language, Nitya Nityana, we are also spiritual, but we are subordinate. Krishna, the Supreme Lord, is a foremost living entity. The word Rishabh means a chief or the Supreme and indicates the Supreme Being or God Himself. So Prabhupada is clearly explaining here that in the spiritual world, everyone has a spiritual body. And the spirit soul that is there in the material world, which is spirit soul of a conditioned living entity, which is 10,000 part of the tip of the hair. So the spirit soul has to have a form. It cannot be without the form. It cannot be formless. The form is the same that he has in the spiritual world. But the size shrinks. Size becomes small. So whenever, as soon as we start getting engaged in spiritual practices, means a spiritual form is developing further and further. Means the spirit body is becoming bigger and bigger because it has to attain the full spiritual form or body before it can go back. So if in the spiritual world somebody has a spiritual body of a peacock, now peacock is not 10,000 part of the tip of the hair in the spiritual world. It's a regular size peacock. So here in the material body, our soul size could be 10,000 part of the tip of the hair, but the shape will be of peacock if we are peacock in the spiritual world. So the yoga or bhakti process, what does it do? It starts developing that shape. So when Moshami asked this question, what is our relationship with Krishna? So when we engage ourselves in these spiritual practices, so slowly, our spiritual form is coming back to its original shape or form, size. And that spiritual form is not just made of Satchitananda, it also has that particular relationship with Krishna. So that relationship, which is right now just covered over, it also starts manifesting. Because that form is not just made of, just like in this body, form is made of earth, water, fire, air, ether. That form is made of Satchitananda, but in a particular relationship. Not just a relationship. I'll tell you one more thing. It has that bhav or feeling, and then it has a color. Every bhav has a color. Just like why the color of Srimati Radharani is molten gold, tapta kanchan. Because the bhav she is in, that bhav, the mood, has a particular color. So when Krishna, who is Shyam Sundar, who is blackish, when he adopts the bhav of Srimati Radharani, the mood of Srimati Radharani, came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he also had to take the color of Srimati Radharani. That's why he's called Gaurang. Lord Ram, his bodily color is of the durba grass, greenish, because that mood that he is in has a particular color. So that is spiritual world. It's so much of varieties. There's so much of it. It's unlimited variety. We can't even imagine that. We get a color from our for our bodies based on our whatever DNA is there and skin color of mother and father and so many material things, but not in the spiritual world. So that is spiritual, and we just have to engage in these practices so seriously that we start developing. Of course, it is developing, but we have to like speed it up. The development of a spiritual form, and then the mood and the power and the emotions and the relationship, everything will be manifested. Anyway, sorry I got distracted a little, but we'll stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mata.
Prabhuji, your distraction brought a new this information today. The color.
Somehow it just came to my mind to explain.
Yeah, it is good. We didn't know about it. कुछ बहुत कुछ नहीं पता हमको, but लगता था.
मेरे को भी कुछ नहीं पता. I'm just scratching the surface only.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Nice.
Thank you, Mata.
Hare
I
Krishna,
guess we can
Prabhuji.
start. Yes, Prabhu. Hari Bol.
This is a little off-topic question. I was watching a movie called The Message, which is on Prophet Muhammad, and it was in Mecca, somewhere in 610 BC, when I mean before the Islam religion. There was
Not
like
BC, AD.
AD. I'm sorry, and there were 360 idols who the villagers or the Mecca people were worshipping before the religion started. So, I mean, and then we know the story, which is very usual, that he was in the cave and Gabriel came and something whispered in his ear, and then he heard from Allah that, okay, you form this religion, and so on. A lot of things happened. And then the most important thing was, don't worship the idols. I mean, that was one of the core principle of or the pillars of Islam, that which we call in Hindi that the Buddh parasti you shouldn't do, or don't worship the idols, right? Now, like we say, lot of there are a lot of myths in Hinduism, like in between India and Sri Lanka, there isn't any bridge, or if there is a bridge, that is the Adam Bridge, which was naturally built because of the ocean's activity, like going left and right, tides and all because of that. Why can't we believe in this way also, that this is also a myth, that Gabriel came and whispered on the ear of Muhammad that like don't worship. Allah said that don't worship idols, because sometimes Prabhuji says in the verses that Nirakar or Akar, it could be any form, right? A god can take a form or cannot take a form. It could be possible. And in the history also, it's mentioned like there are only two people, two prophets, Moses and Muhammad, who have actually talked to Allah directly. And actually not Moses was one who, when he was talking to Allah and asked Allah to show his form, he said, okay, look at the mountain. I look at the mountain, I'm appearing there. And when he looked at the mountain, it was formed in the dust. And he, after that, he lost his consciousness. So my question is, Prabhuji, he can take a form or he cannot take a form. It's up to his will. I mean, God's will. Then how people are so fanatic about it that God does not have a form, and they go by it, by the words.
So your comment has
Very
many points and many questions. First of
Absolutely.
all, when you say only two people have talked to God, Muhammad and Moses, well,
Yeah.
not according to Vedic science. Of course, we are not denying that they have not, but according to Vedic history, many have talked to God, and we are studying them in the Bhagavatam all the time. And whether God has form or not. So our point is same, like you said. How can we put a condition on God? No, you cannot have a form. Can we put a condition? He can have form, a spiritual form, and he can appear formless also as Brahm Jyoti. That's also his aspect. Brahm Jyoti is the effulgence of the body of Krishna. So that is also his aspect. So somebody wants to just believe in Brahm Jyoti or light or Nirakar, it's there. But it's not the ultimate. See, the problem comes in when we become fanatic. As I explained the other day, if a student of elementary school, he studies 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4, and he thinks that is the ultimate maths. For him it is, but for others, they get into integral and calculus and the differential and so many other things. So that is maths, and 1 + 1 is also math. But this math is very basic. So this is what happens when we become so fanatic that we just refuse to appreciate or respect others. And then obviously, I mean, there is only one God, whether we call him Allah or God or Krishna or Jehovah. There's only one God. There cannot be two gods. There's only one God. And moreover, speaking of that concept of Nirakar, no form, because this I have spoken to, because I'm part of this interfaith dialogue also, international interfaith dialogue. I asked one Muslim scholar, I asked him, so when you speak to Allah, does he listen? He said, yeah. I said, if you're in trouble, does he come to help you? Yeah. So don't you think he has a form? When you want, does he talk to you? Yeah. So how can a person not having a form can do all this? So he must be a person. Just because it's not explained so much in Quran, I'm not saying Hazrat Muhammad didn't know. Maybe he just could not teach to the students. Just like in an elementary school, if a teacher is teaching the children 1 + 1 = 2, it's not that the teacher only knows 1 + 1 = 2. He or she might know much more, but the students are of that level. So what he or she could do. Just like in Bible, Jesus Christ says at one place, and Prabhupada has quoted it, that he says, I have much more to tell you, but since you cannot understand it, I'm not going to tell you. So Jesus Christ knew, but his students or his followers were not that level. But that doesn't mean, no, coming back to because sometimes we get very proud of, oh, I'm a Hindu, and because our scriptures talk so much on detail. How many of Hindus, so-called Hindus, try to even learn the scriptures, Vedic scriptures. So many are
Yeah.
Nirakaris, Nirvisheshwadis like Arya Samaji, Radha Swami, and this and that. They don't believe in the form of the Lord. Just because they have a Hindu tag doesn't mean they know everything. So, of course, in Hinduism or in Sanatan Dharma, it's choice is given. You make gradual progress. That's fine. It's all encompassing. Okay, fine. You want to follow Nirvikar, Nirvishesh? Okay, go ahead. You want to just do karma khandi activities, they worship the demigods? It's up to you. If you just want to follow the Gyan path or do the yoga, Hatha yoga, okay, path is open. But if you want to do Bhakti yoga, that path is also open.
So Prabhuji, in your international interfaith that conversation, you said that if there is no form of a God, then how he talks to you, how he solves your problem, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, right? And in one of the scene in this movie, it's like some of the disciple of uh, Prophet Muhammad, they they were just hiding that idol. You know, it's kind of they stole it and they were hiding, and somehow the parents, because the parents of those disciples were still worshipping the idols, so wanted to see that what you're hiding, and then suddenly it just fell and it broke, and then he asked a question that, okay, it got broke, can you, from this broken idol, what he'll do, he is broken himself or herself, then what you're asking or what you're worshipping with this idol which was broken, he or she can't do anything. I mean, god or goddess, that's what he means. So again, other vice versa, it's very confusing actually. Like when we say nirakar or akar forms, uh, simply why don't we become simple and just say, okay, we worship god, and it could be a form, it could not be a form. We are worshipping, just uh, that would be easy, the ease the entire thing. But
Again, one has
yeah,
to understand what's a full truth. With
exactly.
personal feature is a full truth, Bhagwan feature, and then the Paramatma, then the Brahm Jyoti. You want to worship Brahm Jyoti, go right ahead. Who's saying no? But just because we cannot understand, okay, if the idol is broken means God is broken? No, it's just the idol is broken. But God is not broken. Just like in Prabhupada did explain one place, everybody, actually every religion worships some form or the other. Christianity, if you go to churches, the deity of Mother Mary is there, Jesus Christ is there on the cross. It's very much there. If you go to Gurdwaras, they worship Guru Granth Sahib. The Guru Granth Sahib is their deity. So similarly, if you go to Muslims' house, Quran is their deity. Basically, okay, it's not a form, but this is what they worship. So some form has to be there.
Thank you,
Because we
Prabhuji.
can only relate to form, because those who have form, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, those who have form, they can only relate to some form of worship.
It's an endless
And
journey,
and
Prabhuji, I would say.
and the deities,
Mm.
again, very difficult to understand. Deities. Now Krishna says, here it says, my form is Satchidananda. He comes in the deity form, made of stone or wood or metal or paint. How do we connect the two? It is possible. It is very much. Krishna can do whatever he wants. What's so difficult for him?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Well,
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Chalo, we can stop
As
here. You all, yes, Vita.
Sorry, Prabhuji. Actually, I just got one question while you were mentioning about this. I would just wanted to know that the Bhagavan form, Prabhuji, is only have Sachidanandan, or Paramatma form also have the same Sachidanand?
Of course, Paramatma is also Satchidanand, but Paramatma form is not in the spiritual world. It's only in the material.
Yes. Yes.
That's the only
Only
difference.
yes, only Bhagavan form is having that six opulence, and that is in the form. I mean, not formless. This is how.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just feel like sometimes that who believe in Nirakar, in most majorly in India, most of the part people believe in that Nirakar root. So I feel like somehow they still are not being able to accepting properly that Lord Krishna really had come in the Dwapar Yoga, and Lord Rama has come in the Treta Yoga. They have
No,
not
no, no.
accepted fully.
They do believe that they have come, Krishna and Ram, but what they say is ultimate is Nirakar, and from Nirakar, this form of Krishna comes, does his pastimes, and goes back into Nirakar.
I see. Okay.
This is what they say.
I sometimes feel like to have a relationship with even a person, unless and until if we do not talk in front, if we do not, see each other, we can't develop a relationship. So how can we imagine even to have a relationship with a Nirakar Roop? I just like find very difficult to do actually.
They don't say the ultimate goal is to love God. The goal is to merge into God.
Yes.
So for them, relationship with Krishna or Ram or Durga, for them, everybody is same. So relationship with them is like to develop that relationship to ultimately merge in Nirakar. That's it.
All right, Prabhuji, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Chalo, I guess we can start. You all have a wonderful and safe day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.